Today we're going to insert a background inside our game, and we're going to do two things to the background. First, we're going to do a parallax effect, which is basically when the background is moving at different speeds. And then we're also going to make sure that the background continuously, like it endlessly moves in front of us, so we can continue to run infinitely without having to worry about creating more background manually inside our game. So as you can see right now, we have a very basic game inside Unity. We have a ground that we can run on. We have a couple of platforms. I switched out the white bars for the platforms in between episodes. So right now I have a log that looks somewhat better once we do actually insert a background. So this is what I have so far. If I were to play the game just to kind of show what I have, you can see that we can pick up the fireflies, we can jump at the platforms, we can play the game a little bit, but it doesn't look that exciting. Like, we don't have a background, we don't have any sort of fancy moving elements. It looks pretty plain. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a background that we can insert, and like I said, it's going to be moving in layers. So you might have some trees or something that move at a different speed than the mountains in the background or something, to give an illusion of depth, basically. So what I have so far is, if I were to go inside Photoshop, I created a very basic, somewhat of a background. I'm not really much of an artist, but I do watch another YouTuber called Thomas Brush, which is really good at when it comes to 2D art. So I followed a couple of his videos and I came up with this here. So basically I just have a background that we're not gonna be using this sprite for. We're just gonna insert a background inside our camera inside Unity. I have some clouds. I have some mountains in the back. I have some mountains in the center. And then I have some mountains in the front. And I also have the ground that is going to be in front of the player once you actually start running around. So we have a couple of different things in here, and this is what we're going to be using and importing into Unity, and then moving these layers around inside Unity. Now, it is important to mention here that when you want to make a background for a 2D game, there's a couple of different things you need to keep in mind, otherwise you might have to go in and redo the background. The first thing is that you want to make sure that your background is in 4K. It's better to downscale once you import it into Unity than it is to at a later point. If you want to all of a sudden make your game into a 4K game, you can't upscale something. You can only downscale. So making it 4K in the beginning is just generally a rule of thumb, something you might want to do. The second thing you want to make sure you do is that your background is something called seamless, which means that if I were to actually expand my artboard a little bit and take my elements, like everything here, duplicate it and move it over to the side, it should, once we get over here to the side, connect and look like, it just sort of continues onwards. Because once we do get into Unity, we do need to combine some of these next to each other, and that's one of the ways we're going to make it endless. So you want to make sure it is seamless and just continues out. And basically the way to do that is just to do what I just did and just, zoom in and just sort of readjust the borders so they match up with the other side, and then you have something that's seamless. So with all of this, inside Unity, you can go ahead and inside your sprites folder, just create a environment folder and import in whatever you have for your game environment and backgrounds inside this folder here. Something we will need to do is I will need to select all these elements. So over here on the side, if you're making a pixel art game, this might be a little bit different. I'll show you how to do pixel art settings in a second. But if you were to do something that you want to be high-res resolution inside your game and you want to make sure it looks correct, because if I were to put this inside my game right now, you're going to notice that it looks pixelated. And I don't want to have a pixelated art style inside my crisp and neat game. So what I can do is I can go over here to the side, and I'll just keep it at bilinear right now. When it comes to max size, 2048 might be a little bit too small, because we have to remember that I want this to be crisp and sharp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase this to 8192. And then I'm going to go down to compression and say I want to have high quality. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply. If you were to do a pixel art style, because I know a lot of people like that style, including me, then inside your import settings, you would just simply go into point no filter for the filter mode, because that is going to make sure that it doesn't get blurry. And then you also want to make sure that you keep whatever max size you had to begin with, maybe even decrease it and see how that looks like. And then you want to make sure for compression, you just set it to none. So with these settings like we wanted to, we can't just take all the different sprites and drag them in at the same time, because otherwise it's going to create an animation. I don't know why Unity decided that that shouldn't be a possibility. So we're just going to go ahead and take them one at a time, and we're just going to drag them in until we have everything in here inside the scene. You will notice though that they're all ordered in the wrong way. We're going to fix that. So inside the hierarchy, I'm going to right click. I'm going to create an empty element because I want one game object to have all these child elements inside of them once we do actually start creating the background environment. So what I can do is I can call this one environment. And then I'll just take all the ones that we just moved in. So the mountains, the ground, and the clouds, and I'll just sort of shift them inside the environment game object. What I can do in here is I can order them. So I can actually take them and say, you know what? I want first of all, the player should be on layer number 10. So I'll make sure to do that to start with. And then I want to take the clouds and I'm going to make it layer number 1. Then I'll take the mountains in the background. Those are going to be layer number 2. The foreground or the middle mountains are going to be number 3. Then the mountains that are going to be in front, number 4. And then the ground is going to be 20 because I want it to be in front of the player. Now I do want to move the ground up a little bit because I do think it is a bit far down from the background. So let's just go ahead and shift it up so we have something like this. And then to end it off, I'm going to go inside my camera and I'm going to change the background color that we have inside of here. And that is just going to be the background color that we have inside our Photoshop file. So I'm going to go back into Photoshop, going to measure off the background. And I want to grab this color and I'm just going to import that into my camera settings inside Unity. So I'm just going to say the background color is going to be this color here. So now if I were to play the game, you'll notice that we now have a, actual game environment that we can run around in. I do want to move up the foreground a little bit more, so I'll just do that. Ground goes up here. Then I'm going to take the entire environment and I'm just going to shift it down. So I'm going to take the overall parent game object called environment. I'm going to shift it down. And I want to make sure that the ground is just barely not visible inside what we have going here. So just around here. Now, the problem here, of course, is that right now, first of all, the platforms are not in front. So we'll have to fix that too. But the background is not moving. Like it's just kind of like static and none of the mountains or anything is moving with the player when we start running around. So that is something we want to create using Parallax. So first of all, I'm going to take my logs. I'm just going to move them in front. So I'll move them with the player. Actually, let's move it a little bit in front of the player. So we'll say something like 12. And with this, we now have everything like we want it to. Now, when it comes to Parallax, there's two ways to do it. There's one way that is the easy way, but also gives us less control over how we want the parallax effect to actually be done. And then we have the slightly more complicated way, which isn't really that complicated, but it is a little bit more complicated than just simply doing it the easy way, which is going to give us full control over how much we want the background elements to move inside our scene. So I'm going to start by showing you the easy way, and you can always skip forward in the video. I will have everything set up in the scroll bar under the video, so you can just fast forward to the slightly complicated way if you want to. But the easy way is to simply go in and say that the camera is going to change perspective when it comes to the way that it looks at our game. So if I were to go inside our camera, just the main one that we have up here, and go into projection, you're going to set it to perspective. And then if I were to actually play the game right now, you'll notice that nothing really happens because we haven't actually set it up properly. And just to demonstrate, everything looks normal, no changes happened so far. But if I were to click on the 2D button up here inside our scene, you'll notice that right now everything is on the same layer. Like there's nothing behind on the Z axis. Now to begin with here, there is something we need to do, which is that right now our environment is not zeroed out, which is something we usually want to do every time we insert something inside our hierarchy. We want to make sure everything is zeroed out. So with our environment, the overall parent game object, we want to make sure that the Z-axis is set to 0, and we want to make sure the X-axis is set to 0. Now we don't need to adjust the Y-axis because we did actually go in and adjust that previously. So I'm just going to keep the Y-axis as it is right now because as you can see, it actually matches up with the game. So if I were to move this one around, you notice that, that's not what we want. So going back inside 3D mode, we will need to make sure that all these different elements inside our environment is actually behind each other. So what I'll do is I'll take my ground and I'll make sure that the Z-axis is set to 0. So it's on the same layer as my player, because the player and the ground is going to move at the same speed. So we want to keep these on the same one. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mountains 1. I'm going to move it to 1. So it's right behind the player. I'm going to take mountains 2. Move it to 2, mountains 3, move it to 3, just so we have some depth going here. And then I'll take the clouds, move to 4. So now if we were to actually move around, you can actually see we have a little bit of distancing going on in between every single object we have in here. Now, I might have moved my mountains background a little bit too far back, so let's make that 3. The clouds, gonna be 4. And there we go. So now going back inside our game, I'm just gonna extend my ground a little bit because I might fall over the edge. So I'll just move it out. So we have a lot to run on. And if I were to play the game, you'll notice that if I move around, the environments are actually moving and shifting compared to how they are inside the camera when it comes to like moving them back and such. So we now have something called parallax effect going inside our game. However, like I said, this doesn't give us a lot of control, and there is another way to do it where we actually go in and do it using a script. So that's what we're gonna do next. So inside my assets folder, I'm gonna go down inside my scripts folder. I'm gonna create a new script, just gonna say C# script, and I'm going to call this one move background. You could also call it parallax or something. I'll just call it move background. And with this created, I'm then going to open it up inside my editor. So basically the way we're going to do a parallax effect inside our script here is by saying, okay, so when the camera is moving compared to the camera's position, we want to move the background elements. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of different fields to start with. So the first field we're going to include here is something called start position, which is going to be the starting position of this current object that has this script attached to it. So one of the background elements, for example. So I'll create a private float, and I'll call this one start position. Then we also want to grab the camera because we want to know where the camera is compared to this game object that we have here. So we're going to create a private camera, and do keep in mind that when we create a private camera, we do need to go inside our start method and actually fetch the camera, whereas some people might prefer to make this a public field so they can actually go inside the Unity editor and drag and drop the camera inside this public field inside the editor in the inspector, instead of grabbing the object using code inside the start function. It really depends on your personal preference. I like to do it inside using code. With this, I'm going to create my private camera. I'm just going to call it cam. I do also want to create a float called parallax effect, which is going to be the one that we use to determine how much parallax we want in this specific game object here. So what I'll do is I'll create a private float parallax that is with 1 R and 2 Ls. But now in order to actually change the parallax effect inside the editor, because that is something we will need to do, I'm going to create something called serialize in front of my field, which we haven't talked about yet. So I'm just going to say serialize field. Basically what this does is that it can actually take private fields and actually show them inside our editor without making them public. The basic difference between public and creating serialized field in front of a private field is the mindset of, I don't want to access this specific field from another script at some point, so we don't need to make it public in that sense. But I do want to be able to go inside my editor and manually type in what I want this number to be. So with that, I can create a serialized field, since it actually stores this field inside the memory of the editor, so we can actually mess with it inside the editor. So if you've seen serialized field, which you will probably see a lot of times when you see code on the internet, that is basically what it does. So with that, I'm going to go inside my start function, and because I chose to make this a private camera, I want to make sure that I actually set this camera equal to GameObjects dot find parentheses semicolon, and then I want to find a game object called the name of my camera. Now in my case, I'm using a Cinemachine camera. So if you're not using Cinemachine inside Unity, you just want to copy the name of your main camera. If not, then you want to copy the name of Cinemachine. So I just want to highlight the name of my Cinemachine object, go inside my code, and I just want to paste that name in. Oh, and we do actually need to not call this one a camera object. We do need to call this a game object. Otherwise, this is not going to work. What I also want to do inside my start position is I do want to get the current game object that we're messing with here. So I want to grab the start position, paste it inside my start method, and then I just want to set it equal to transform dot position dot x. And this is basically because we just need to get the x-axis because we're moving sideways when it comes to the positioning of this current object. And then inside update, the first thing we're going to do is we want to make sure that the parallax effect that we set inside the editor is going to actually affect how the background is moving compared to how the camera is moving. So inside update, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a float called distance. And what I basically want to do here is I want to get the camera's position and then multiply it with the parallax effect that we have up here. So I want to say we have cam dot transform dot position dot x, because we want to get the x position, and I want to multiply it with my parallax effect. So I'm just going to insert that in here, and then semicolon at the end here, of course. And then I basically want to move the actual background element, so the current game object this script is attached to. So I'll go to the next line and I'll say transform dot position is going to be equal to new vector 3 parentheses semicolon, and then the first one in here is going to be the x-axis, which I want to set to the start position plus the distance that we just created here. So I want to say we have a starting position of this current game object. Then I want to add the distance, so we know how much it needs to move. Then I want to say we have a y-axis as well. And I'm just going to set it to the current y-axis that we have for this current game object. So I'm just going to say transform.position dot y, because we don't need to change it, it just needs to stay the same. And I'll do the same thing for the z axis. So I'll just copy, paste, and say we want the z position. So with this, we now have a parallax effect going inside our game as well. So if I were to go back inside my Unity editor, I want to make sure I go to the camera and undo what I did before in the first easy way to do this. So I want to make sure my projection is set to orthographic, because that is the default standard way to do it. And we don't need to do anything with the Z axis when we move the layers behind each other. That is going to be the same no matter how you're going to do this. So just to show you, because right now nothing is going to happen, even though we have the different layers behind each other, because we did that in the first example, there's going to be no parallax going on inside our game. So just to let you know that nothing is changed even though the layers are behind each other. So, in order to get the parallax working, what we can do is we can go in and highlight all the game objects inside our environment game object, and we just sort of add our move background inside the inspector to add it to all the different game objects. If you drag it up onto these up here, it's not going to work. You're just going to add them one by one. And with this, if I were to actually go into each game object and set a parallax effect for each of them, you'll notice that the parallax effect is going to be working. So for the first one, which is going to be the ground, we want to make sure it has a parallax effect of 0, because we want it to be moving at the same speed of the camera, which basically means that the front ground is going to be moving with the player at the same speed as the player, because the camera is following the player. Does that make sense? So keep the ground at 0, and then I'll go to the mountains in the background, which has to move a little bit faster compared to the ground that is in front of the player. So I'm going to set this one to 0.3. I'm going to copy it, go into mountains number 2, and I want to set this one to 0.5. Then I want to go to the next mountains, which is mountain number 3, and set this one to 0.7. And then I want to go to the clouds, which are going to be all the way in the background, and set it to 0.9. Then with this setup, I can actually play the game, and you'll notice that when I start moving, all the different elements are moving just like before, but we can actually control how fast I want it to move inside when it comes to this script here. With this, you basically have everything working like it's intended when it comes to the parallax effect. So if you were to go inside Photoshop and you created an entire level inside Photoshop, then this is all you need to have. But if you want to create something that is endless, like, you know, an endless runner type of game sort of thing, then of course right now, if you were to run to the edge, you'll notice that everything kind of stops. So if you want to create that type of game, and you really need to ask yourself, what kind of game do you want to make? Do you want to make something where the background is endless? Kind of like I want to do in this next part here? Or did you already have an entire level made inside Photoshop? Because then you're not going to need this next part. But in my case here, I want this to continue out into the infinite. So we're going to add a little bit of code inside our move background script. So I'm going to go back inside of it. And what I want to add is I want to add a float called length. Just going to copy paste, and I'm going to call this one length. And the length is basically going to be the length of this current sprite that we have here. So if I were to have this script onto my ground layer, then it's going to take the length of the ground layer and say, okay, so once we get to the edge of this ground layer, then we want to move it ahead of the player. So in order to do that, we will also need to go inside our start function. And I basically want to grab my length and set it equal to get components, and I want to set this one to sprite renderer. And the reason we want to grab the sprite renderer is because we can actually, using this code here, once we have the sprite renderer component, we can actually, using the sprite renderer, see how long the sprite is inside our game by taking the length of the sprite renderer for this particular sprite. So we can say we have dot bounds, which is the borders of the sprite, dot size, dot x. because we want to get the size when it comes to the length of this sprite here. And this is basically going to return the full length of this current sprite that we're inside of. And then we do need to add some additional code inside our update statement. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to copy the float distance, and I'm going to call this one temp for temporary. And basically what temp is going to do is that it's going to take a look at where this current object is at this point in time, because the background is constantly moving because of the parallax effect. But then I want to say parentheses around the parallax effect and say 1 minus parallax effect. Because the parallax effect is basically the offset that we set inside the inspector. So by taking 1 minus the offset, we now have where the current position is of this object at this point in time. So with this, I am now going to go below where we actually transform the positioning of the parallax effect inside the background element. And I want to run a if statement. So I'm going to say if curly brackets. And we basically want to check if the current camera is moving further than the length of the current sprite that we have. And because we want to take into consideration the current temporary location of this sprite because of the parallax effect, we do need to check for all these three things inside the if statement. So I'm going to say we have our temp, and if temp is greater than our start position plus the length of the sprite, then we want to shift the background. So inside where we have the curly brackets, basically just need to take the start position of where the current game object is. And I want to say I want to add equal, which means that we're adding something to itself. And I want to add the length of the entire sprite. So basically now we're taking the sprite and we're moving it so it shifts the full length of the sprite in front of itself. And then I want to run a else if statement below here, because now we're checking for if we're running to the right, but I also want to check if I'm running to the left, because then we want to shift everything the other direction. So what I'm going to do is I want to just copy paste else if, and then I want to check if the temp is lesser than start position minus length. And if so, then I want to move the background the opposite direction by saying not plus equal, but minus equal. So with this line of code, everything you would think would be working inside our editor, but there is going to be a problem, because if I were to start playing, you'll notice that right now, everything is shifting, and I'll actually move it over here so you can actually see it properly. Everything is shifting like it's supposed to, but you'll notice that it's not doing it fast enough. So if we want to keep running, you can see, oh, it starts shifting. And if I run the other direction, you can see it starts shifting the other way back again. And the reason that this is happening is because we do need to expand our current background so it is one more length to the right and one more to the left. The basic way we do that in a very fast way is that we go inside our editor. And first of all, we want to make sure we remove all the different move background scripts from all these different elements inside the environment. So we do need to do that. I can't just highlight everything and just go in and say remove component. So with all the move background scripts removed from all these different game objects in here, what I'll do is I'll actually duplicate by clicking Control D or Command D if you're on Mac. Duplicate everything. I'll do it twice. And then I want to take all the mountain 3s and move up into the mountain 3 up inside the initial game object we started duplicating from. So I'll do the same thing with mountain 2, which is these down here. Just move them up into mountain 2. I'll take mountain 1, move it into mountain 1. I'll take the ground, move it into the ground, and take all the clouds and move it into the cloud. And with this done, you want to make sure you highlight all the parent elements, so not the child elements that we just duplicated, so the original ones. So I'm just gonna highlight those. And I want to insert the move background script inside only the parent elements, not the child elements. So with this, we now need to take the child elements and move them out to the side to make sure they fit to the left and to the right of what we have in here. So what I'll do is I'll go inside my editor. I'll take the first duplicate of mountains 3, and I'll just sort of move it out to the side so it matches seamlessly with what we have here. And I actually know exactly what I'll be typing in. I'll be typing in 38.38 because that is what matches with my particular background. Again, this might be different for you. Just kind of shift it over, make sure it matches. So I'll take my x-axis, which is minus 38.38. I'll copy it, and I'll go over to my mountains number 3, and I'll just paste it in so it's plus instead, because then it's going to move to the other side. So if we were to zoom out, you can see we have it to the other side as well. And with that, I'm just going to do that to all the different elements. So I'm going to say mountains 2 is going to be minus 38.38. Then I'll take the other one, which is going to be plus 38.38. And you're just gonna keep shifting these out like, you know, with all of them to make sure everything is like it's supposed to. There we go. For the ground, for the clouds, and like so. So now everything has been duplicated to the sides. So everything is matching seamlessly to the left and to the right. So with this, we're almost done. We need to do one more thing, which we have done once before, but because we removed the scripts and we had to add them again, we do need to go inside our parents one more time and set the parallax effect offset inside our editor. So right now for the ground, that is going to be 0 because we wanted to move at the same speed as the player. We want to take the mountains 1, make this to 0.3, take mountains 2, make that to 0.5, mountains 3, 0.7, and then the clouds are going to be 0.9. And with this, everything is done. So we can actually go ahead and click play. And you'll notice that I'll actually keep my editor here open because you need to see what happens. If we were to zoom out, you'll notice that when I start running with my player, the backgrounds are going to start shifting as I'm moving to the side. And you notice that inside my game screen, everything is moving like it's supposed to. Of course, right now, you will notice that because our ground is not long enough, I can actually keep increasing it if I wanted to. Just, you know, make it even longer just to kind of test it out. You know, everything looks wonderful and nothing is appearing inside the game view. So we know that everything is working like it's intended. So as you can see, we just keep running and the background is just going to keep letting us run and spawn all the environment when we keep running to the left or to the right. So just to test the other side, everything is working. There we go. Everything is working exactly like we want it to. So just a small tip at the end here in case you want to not manually increase the ground size. If you want this to be an endless runner, then one way you can do it is you can actually go ahead and just delete the ground and go down to the ground element inside your environment and add a component, which is going to be a box collider 2D. So we want to say the size of the y-axis is going to be something like, let's just make it 1. And then I just want to shift it down so that it goes right below what we want it to be, you know, just like with the regular ground. So with this, we can now increase the length. So I'm just going to increase it to the length of everything that is in here. So roughly about 115, because then it goes from the left side and all the way to the right side. And now if I were to play it, you'll actually notice that if I highlight the ground, so we can actually see the collider. It's very subtle. It's very hard to see. You know what? Let's make the collider 120 so we can actually see it over the edge. Because you see, now we can actually see it. It's right there. Okay, so you can see it when we start testing. So when I start running, you'll notice that the collider is going to shift with the environment. So when I start running, let's actually move it out a little bit. I start running, you can now see that the collider shifts out with it. It's probably a little bit tiny on your screen. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. But everything is working. I can continue running endlessly and we have an endless game now, basically. The idea here for endless games, just to point it out, because you might be thinking that, okay, so if the ground collider is moving with the player, what if there's an enemy over here? Does it just like fall to the ground? Yes, it does. And the whole idea with endless runners, like what we just set up here, is basically that you spawn in enemies when they enter the screen for the player. And again, it really depends on what type of game you're making. If you want to make a game where you have this endless background, but you do have an endpoint in your level, so you actually go into your editor, and let's say somewhere over here, you make a goal that you can run through and then the game stops, then just do that and just add in a ground like the one I deleted before, and just make sure it stretches all the way to the end goal. And then, you know, you have a seamless background, but you also still have an endpoint in your level. Again, I can keep talking about what type of game you might be making, and then you have to make changes to it depending on the type of game. Basically, you learn how to make parallax effect in 2 different ways, and you learn how to make a seamless background, which is all I wanted to show in this episode here. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.